All right. So thanks everybody for joining. My name is Mark Jackson. Been using Tableau for, I guess it's around 4 years now, and I was kind of asked to produce this visualization, or really more to kind of give some background on what I've done that's kind of led to me becoming a Tableau Zen Master. And I wasn't, really sure myself. One of the things I say about what qualifies you to be a Tableau Zen Master is that you don't try to be a Tableau Zen Master. So I was actually kind of surprised when I was selected. It's a great honor. So as I thought about it and, how to tell my story, what, I think is maybe in my background that led to me being selected, I thought, why not try to visualize this in Tableau? Because Andy Cockgreave actually wanted to do a blog post on Tableau Public about the current Tableau Zen Masters, and I thought a visualization would be a good way to tell that story. I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone. There was also the quantified self competition that was going on at the same time as the Iron Viz feeder, so I decided I'd submit this to see if it would actually get me in the competition. I didn't win. I think it's probably mainly because it doesn't really fit with the quantified self movement, and it's not a scientific experiment that is a way to improve my life. It's really just more of a visualization of my history. I did learn a lot about myself in the process, which was pretty cool, and mostly what I learned was things that I had forgotten about myself, what I was doing at certain points in time and how that correlated with the kind of work that I was doing, be it in school or in the workplace, and what were the different tools I was using where I was living at the time. So the concept I came up with, I'll show you guys that. I actually drew it out on paper first. It's not something I normally do because Tableau is the tool that lets you kind of fail quickly, as Joe Mako likes to say. I tend to develop everything in Tableau and just manipulate stuff until I get it the way I want. But this was something I really kind of had to think about a lot, and how did I want to communicate this information in an efficient way. And one of the things I wanted to do was make it look like something that someone would say that wasn't created in Tableau. So this was the original drawing. So I had my name and a picture up here, and then I thought about hard skills that I had and percent usage of those skills over time. So I drew that out on the paper. And since it's a little bit subjective, I kind of created my own access labels where I said I'm an expert with it, I'm living and breathing it, or just kind of getting the hang of it. And did the same thing on the usage. You can see I drew out the state here and identified where I lived and had a Gantt bar showing how long I had lived there. And then I also had this area chart showing education and work experience that I had drawn out. And I had a few other things that I originally thought about including, like what are the things I think about a lot, some Myers-Briggs things that I thought about incorporating, and kind of how I spend my day. And I'd also reserved this section over here to give kind of a text description. Originally, I didn't really think about incorporating audio into the visualization. I thought I would just have it where you clicked on a line and it brought up a text description that kind of told my story. But I actually got inspired by something that Matt Francis did with his Iron Viz entry in the previous contest, where it was a F1 Viz, and he had some sounds incorporated from the web, and I thought, I could do that. With this Viz, I just need to record it, and I ended up using GarageBand to record my voice and incorporated some music from GarageBand so that there was some background noise as well. So this was the original concept, and this was how it all turned out. So it's pretty close to being the same. I had to reorganize it a bit. I moved the state visualization up here along with the Gantt bar, and I put my skill level below that, and then the area chart. And you see I cut out some of the stuff. I just didn't feel like it really flowed with the rest of the story. I had everything here on this common axis showing years, 1996 through 2012. Everything shared that axis, the Gantt bar, the skills, the area chart. and then it basically broke up into those other sections, and so I decided to cut it in the end. And what I ended up replacing it with was this showcase section. So I had to go and look back through a lot of images on my computer that I've collected over the years of different things that I was doing, curate all that content, and this is where it ended up going. So when you would click on something, if you wanted to see what I was doing while I was at KPMG, it would pull up content here in this area, and you could kind of toggle through it with this quick filter. And then the other thing it would do when you clicked on it is at the top it would actually start telling the story, and I'll turn my speakers on. We're in Athens. I've never even heard of them and originally thought they were radio. I don't know if you can hear that, but I feel very fortunate. This content is being played over the web through a web object. So when I clicked on this, there's a couple of actions that kicked off. One of them was a URL action that populated this web object on the dashboard, and the other action is something that brought up content in this view. So then I'll deselect this. So at the top, you could click on any of these things. You could click on the Gantt bar, and here it would tell the story about what I was doing in Athens. It pulled up some pictures from Athens that were incorporated as part of the audio story. And same thing with the skills here. So if I want to know what I was doing with Excel, I could click on Excel. It would tell the story with Excel. It would highlight that line on the skills and on the usage, so I can see how much I was using it and how good I was at the time. It's easy to compare where I was living and the education and work that I was doing at the time. And then the same thing where it pulls up in the same view, background images. So, escape out of this. I want to show you actually how I accomplished some of this stuff. The most time-consuming part of all of this wasn't really the design and the layout. It was really more the content curation, the writing of the story. So this is actually the story that I wrote out, and I used notes on my iPhone, and for a lot of it I just actually spoke it using Siri into my iPhone notes. And it wrote all this out, so I put where I went to high school, college, ended up at the University of Georgia, just thought about what I was doing and wrote a story. And as you can see, this ended up being 5,383 words worth of information. So it took me quite a bit of time to write all of this stuff. And then the next step was I actually had to record it using GarageBand on my Mac. So I'm not a real expert with GarageBand, so I kind of had to bring myself up to speed on how to use that, and spoke all of this and saved all those as separate audio files. And I did some web research and found a site called Spreaker. And let's see if I can actually pull that up. So Spreaker was pretty cool. I figured out that it had a embedded audio player that would autoplay, or it had some options where you could autoplay and you could set the size of it. So this is the website I found. It was free. I think it's around 10 hours of content that you can put on here without any charge, and there's no additional charge for the amount of traffic that it gets. So it ended up being a pretty cool thing. You can actually record audio into Spreaker using your iPhone. There's an app for that. And it's kind of a radio broadcast tool, so you could do live broadcasts and all that. But it was perfect for what I wanted to do. And then I needed a website or web hosting site that I could use to actually embed that audio player in. So I found another free service. I think it was biz.info that I used. And the cool thing about it is it didn't have any ads on it, so I didn't have to worry about ads popping up in the web pages that I loaded. So created separate pages for all of the individual sections. So I had an audio clip and a web page with the embedded player for each one of these things. It had its own unique URL that I would reference in the underlying data. So that, along with collecting all the pictures, finding all the content that I would put in the showcase, was the most time-consuming part. All of the data that I put together for this is in this one Excel file. So this shows you how all the data is structured. I've got my work and education content here. That's plugs into this section here. That's actually what builds this view. So in Excel, usually I'll write one tab that'll be how I enter the data. So this is a much easier way for me to enter all of this information. I could give it a record ID, the city where it was, the type, whether it was a job or a school thing, institution, the role I had there, and then a from date and a to date. Number of hours actually controlled the vertical axis. So that's the height that you see on the viz here, so hours per week. So you can see which ones I was spending more time doing. The duration controlled the number of months that it's a calculation of this date to this date. And then the URL is the reference to the audio file that I recorded and published to the web. However, this alone isn't enough to make that viz. It actually has to be laid out differently. I actually need a point for every single month-year combination. So I have to pivot that information, and that's why I have this second tab here. So it greatly expands my number of rows from 15 to 311 rows of information to create that visualization. And I didn't type this information in. Really what I did is I wrote a bunch of formulas here that would increment the record ID that I needed to reference, increment the months, so based on the number of months that it was finding for that record. So there are 55 months, and so you'll see there's 55 rows that appear. So it draws a point for every single one, repeats the information along with the height, along with the URL, and then this is the date axis that Tableau uses to actually draw that information. So if we go and look at the viz for that, you'll see that I've got my date field that's making columns for me. I've got the weekly hours here that's making a vertical axis. So you see that. And then I also have this thing where it's doing a dual axis to create these bubbles here. I'm going to show that header also. So I fixed the axis on both of these so I could get it exactly like I wanted to, and it worked on the dashboard. So I fixed the height on this sum of Y field, and I fixed the height on the weekly hours field. If we go back to my Excel file, I actually had a different approach to this originally. But those bubbles are here at the bottom. So these are major events like when I married my wife, when my kids were born, when I became a Tableau Zen Master. And then this column over here is that Y, which is controlling the height. So these are being plotted at 1.5, and that's being plotted at negative 1.5. That's how you see that these are here at the top, and the Zen Master one there is at the bottom. The original approach I had to this was, this is the older version, and these are actually images that I had just dropped into place. But I realized it wasn't going to quite work with what I wanted to do, because when I would click on these things, if I had a URL embedded with it, it would actually open another page. It wouldn't direct that into this web page object. So I realized I was actually going to have to incorporate that into the viz. So that's how I came up with the dual axis here, and this is actually a dot that's controlling a shape. And I have a new computer here, so I don't think I actually have those folders. Oh, I do. Quantified self. So I dropped those into my quantified self folder and my shape folder on the Tableau repository, and just assign those shapes here. And then these here are actually annotations that control the labels and the little vertical drop there with the dotted line. So when you see that here, it ends up getting plotted right on top of that. So I really just kind of had to play around with this axis and tweak it until I got it exactly like I wanted. And let's see, next one. This is the places where I live. So this is the data that controls the viz at the top. So this actually isn't a Gantt bar. It's actually a line chart with 2 points. So you'll see I've got 2 points for Barnesville, 2 for Athens, and 2 for Atlanta that specify the date range that it goes through. Originally I had this as one line for each. I ended up just using the from date. And I plotted the Y vertical axis here is the latitude, which I just pulled from a Google search, I believe. And again, put in my URLs for the audio, and then this duration, which I used in the label, so when you would mouse over, that's the label that shows up there. So then the way this one is set up, let's see. You can see I've got that latitude field here, and then I've got my months going across that way. And this was another one where I had to just manually fix the axis until I could get it to line up with the map that I created. And you can see that this is actually set to it's a line chart, so it just connects those lines, coloring them on city. And come back here. So you can see actually showing this actually messed up my line alignment. So that was another one of the tricky things, was actually getting this so it looked like everything was running on this on the exact same axis. If I hide that again, you can see how those lines now line up. And this is actually just an image. So I created this image in PowerPoint, and PowerPoint is by far my favorite drawing tool. So this was my working file that I used when I was creating this visualization. So I would work on, I'd draw the basic elements in Tableau. So this was kind of an earlier version that I created after I had some of the data elements. I just dropped them onto a dashboard. And then I drew the lines here in PowerPoint, some of them taller than the others, and made these labels across the top. Actually selected all of these things to make sure that they were all lined up exactly right. Excel has this little helpful thing where you can distribute everything horizontally so you can make sure everything's equally spaced. That way I could be pretty certain that the lines that Tableau would draw would be roughly the same size. It would just be a matter of me tweaking the data access start and end points to get them to line up exactly, which was a little tedious, but not too bad. Below this you have the tool selector. So there's a couple of visualizations here. This one's has the icons here where I'm using a shape. I just did a Google search and found all of these icons, and for the ones where I couldn't find grayscale ones, I just made them grayscale in PowerPoint, saved them as image files into my shape folder, and then used them in the visualization. And then this is another visualization here, which actually just creates the colors, use the exact same colors that are in the line chart, has the tool as the column header. That way it acted sort of as a legend. Since all of this was grayscale, I didn't want it to really stand out and overwhelm everything else. But I did want it to kind of line up and have the same colors here. So if you're just looking at it, you could kind of say, okay, the red one's flash. You wouldn't have to necessarily interact with it and to click it to see what it was. And this piece is another image. This is another thing that I just drew in PowerPoint. And just to kind of show you briefly how that works, I would have just inserted a shape, found this little tool here, drag that out, make it more of an oval, copy and paste that, make this one a little bit smaller, something like this, and then maybe add in a label. So add another shape with the label. And I don't know why that's so thin. So then I would have positioned that here and then come through and recolored this, made that, oops, not the outline, filled the shape with white, and PowerPoint has tons of nice little formatting things. I would have made the shadow something inner like that. And so you kind of roughly get an idea of how it was that I created that segment. I would highlight all of this stuff and then save it as a picture in my pictures folder, and then go back into Tableau and drop it in, and then drop the other visualizations on top of it. The rest of that is just some formatting tweaks. To do the axis labels here, these are actually pictures also that I created in my PowerPoint slide. So as we scroll through here, you'll see I've got where I've actually drawn these, and I just saved that as an image, exported it. The nice thing is in Tableau 8, you had transparency with images, so it would show through to the background visualization. In the original one I created too, this was a map. So you can see I can hover over this, and this was a real map in here. But I didn't really like the way this kind of encroached upon the other visualizations. I didn't like how, because you don't have transparency in the actual visualization, this part wasn't transparent. I didn't like that. So what I ended up doing instead was copying and pasting this as an image into PowerPoint, and in the final viz, this is actually just an image. These little bars are also images that I created in PowerPoint. All the icons, I also created those in PowerPoint. The images I found on the web, I recolored them a little bit and then put these circles around them and put some text. Ended up copying and pasting these, saving them as pictures, and then inserting those as icons along here. And you can see here I had some other things incorporated. This was going to be the balance section, which was going to be the Myers-Briggs, and my routine had the little calendar icon, but I ended up not using those. These were the pictures that I got of my kids and my wife and I that I used. I again used formatting that's available here, so you can see PowerPoint again has some cool effects you can apply to pictures. Save that. And one of the tricky things with this line chart, you can see originally all I had was the skills, but I wanted to do the usage as well, and I realized that this was going to be really tedious. So if we go back to my Excel file, this was my source for how good was I at that tool at that time, and then this section was the usage as a percentage, 0 to 1, or 0 to 100%. This was just on a scale of 1 to 10. This wasn't so bad to fill out because you can see I didn't have a lot of variation. I just plugged in values kind of as a rough estimate of what I thought my skill level was with it at the time, reflecting on how much I was using it and kind of looking at some of the work I was doing at the time. And just kind of copied it over and adjusted the numbers as necessary and kept dragging it across. But you can see there's a lot of columns. There's actually 224, I believe, different columns here, times, see how many tools, 13 tools. If we look to see how much data entry this would be, there is 5,850 cells here that I would have to populate in order to build that viz. This was bad enough, but I knew that the percentages was going to be even worse, and I really wanted a smooth transition between the viz so that you get that final effect. This one's a little bit more jagged, but this one you can see is much more smooth line. So how did I capture that? What I ended up doing is deciding, hey, I'm pretty good with Visual Basic, and that you can incorporate that with Excel. So I did a Google search, and I found some code that would let me capture the XY coordinates of my mouse. And I found another code segment which would let me execute code at certain intervals. So in this case, this runs a loop every quarter of a second and then calls this mouse cursor get XY coordinates. That's this routine, and then it plugs the results of that into one of the cells in the workbook. So the way that this worked out, this is the workbook. So I copied and pasted my dashboard into here. And so originally it just had this top section. So what I wanted to do was actually draw, how much was I actually using this over time, kind of understanding the context of where I was and what I was doing at the time. This kind of helped me decide how much I was using it. So you can execute those macros from here, and I assigned some shortcut keys. So the start timer was Control-J, and the end timer was Control-K. And that would populate these cells. So I would wipe this out, and I would come down here, and I would press Control-J. And you see, as I move my mouse, it's actually capturing the XY coordinates over time. And then when I was done drawing, I'd press Control-K to stop it. These formulas here would kind of translate that in terms of a percentage. And then this sheet over here would format it and basically spread out those numbers over the number of months that I had, all 224 of them. And then this line here Actually, this line here is what I would copy and paste back into my other spreadsheet into this line. So that made the data capture way easier. I was able to do this, after I created that code in probably 15 minutes, capture all of this information. This is another one of those where this isn't the final format of the data for me to plug it into Tableau, so I had to pivot that again. So this was my skill level pivot using the same technique where I kind of increment the date index and the tool ID that I needed to capture. It plugged in the date value, the tool name. Filter category was something that was used for the images. I'm using that to direct the action to plug the images into that showcase section. And then the URL for the audio. So it plugged in the skill level and it plugged in the usage. I did some moving average sorts of things to smooth the line out a little bit so it wasn't just a jagged straight line. But what you would see is for every single one of these tools, there's 224 different points that are being captured. And so this is the sheet that I actually connect to in Tableau to build that visualization. And the last source was for the actual images themselves. So this is what builds that showcase section at the bottom that displays the images. I've got a category, which is being used on the filter action. I've got the image name, which the actual image is tied to, an ID. The ID is actually used on the to control this quick filter here. So I'm going to select something here so we can see how this works. I've got KPMG selected. I'm going to go to this viz. And what you got here is your X and your Y. So if we come back to our Excel file, this is the X and the Y. That's appearing right here. Everything is plotted at 0. And then the image ID you can see is actually what's controlling the quick filter so that it's the same numbers for every single section, 1 through however many there are. The trick with this is if you've ever tried to use shapes and blow them up, they can become really pixelated and it's not a very clear picture. And you can see that these are really clear. So the way I figured out how to do that was to use background images. So if I come here to background images and select this, this is actually what's plugging in those images using the XY coordinates to plot the image. So I've got Ansley at the beach, her running, some of the different tools that I've got. And if we take a look at this, it's referencing an image that I collected. It's using my XY field and everything's plotted 0, 1, and 0, 10 for Y. And then under options, this neat feature that I found when creating this visualization is you can actually get an image to display only when certain values exist on your chart. So this one only displays when our image field says crystal invoices. So for every single one of the images, you'll see I've got this is that a buggy image, 0, 10. Actually, I guess they're not all 0, 10. And this one's set to show only when buggy days is selected as an image. So as we toggle through these on the quick filter, it changes because there's a different image that's showing up. And for a few of these things, I actually have annotations, I believe. Let's see if I do Excel. Yeah, so this is actually an annotation that shows up that's tied to the actual point down here, and I just made those transparent so they wouldn't show up. And this is actually a separate visualization too, so I could get a nice little formatted text with the category and the image name that displays right there. And let me think, see if there's anything else to tell you guys. Oh, and at the top, I've got follow me things, which are just images. These are actually transparent images. So this is one image here, which has the follow me and all the icons that I built. I did that in PowerPoint. And then on top of these are actually transparent images. There's nothing in them. They're just transparent, and they have a URL attached to them, so that when you click them, it actually takes you to an external site. And then I also did this little visualization hover here. I like to do this with a lot of my visualizations. I do this with most of the stuff I do at work too that explains the visualization and how it works. Gives the user some clues as to what to do. And let me check my PowerPoint slide here. See some of the scrap stuff that I've got here to build different content. All of this was built in PowerPoint as well. I guess I must have deleted the original source, but PowerPoint's an amazing tool for drawing stuff. So I guess with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thanks, Mark. This is really impressive. You spent a lot of time on them, obviously. How long did it end up taking you?
I think I said it was between 20 and 30 hours, but a lot of that was me finding images and writing the story and recording the story. The actual visualization part of it wasn't so bad. I'd say in total on the visualization part, the pure Tableau piece, I maybe spent 4 hours. Drawing the stuff, maybe a couple hours drawing things in PowerPoint, but the rest of it was curating all the content. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Matt Francis had a question.
Yeah. Hi, Mark. So how many times did you swear about the fact that you didn't have a snap to grid option?
Yes, I would definitely like to see that feature incorporated. I'd actually like to see a lot of the features that exist in PowerPoint from a drawing perspective incorporated into Tableau. That way I could kind of cut some of my PowerPoint workflow out and just do it directly in Tableau. I know it's something that's been kicked around by Tableau a lot, and they're trying to figure out, how it would be implemented if they did it. So I hope at some point it gets incorporated.
KK, looks like I just took you off mute, so go ahead. KK, did you have a question?
But he's having audio trouble.
Yeah, looks like it. Okay. Michael Christiani, go ahead.
Yes, Mark, I was wondering, you mentioned 20 to 30 hours. I don't remember you saying how much of that time was, thinking about this whole thing in terms of what you wanted to do and visualizing in your head how this was going to work, or was that sort of organic? It's just add this feature, add that feature, that sort of thing. So is that part of the 20 to 30 hours, or is that something that?
Yeah, the question was, you were a little bit soft there, but the question was how much time did it take to kind of think up the design and figure out how I wanted to lay it all out. And it didn't take me a ton of time. I sat in my office one day and just drew this, and it probably was about 15 minutes, and this was really close to what it ended up being. So the rest was kind of reorganizing it a bit. I used PowerPoint a lot to kind of draw different things on top of what I had already built. So I'd copy and paste the dashboard into PowerPoint, draw some things on top of it just to see how it would work, because it was so much easier just to do that work in PowerPoint as opposed to in Tableau. But yeah, the rest of it was a little bit organic, deciding exactly how to get things positioned and what content to include and not include. But the original drawing was probably 15 minutes.
Hey, Mark, this is Dustin.
Hey, Dustin.
Hey, I got a question for you. So flip back to your viz for a second. I had a special affinity for this just because it mapped out both, technical tools, technical skills, visual presentation stuff, right? Obviously, a ton of time spent in PowerPoint. And I'm looking at all of this, and I kind of started to think, I'm like, oh, man, I should learn more of this, or, oh, man, I clearly don't know anywhere close to enough, of this, or I wonder if PHP is something I should pick up. in terms of, and I guess this is a two-part question. From a data discovery, data analysis, working with data perspective, in addition to Tableau, what would be your recommended tool you think everyone should pick up? And then the second part of that question is on the data presentation side, right? What would be, the software or the skill that you think people should pick up based on your experience?
Well, I think probably the most important thing that I had in my background was the fact that very early on, I think I was 15 years old, I started using Visual Basic to write things. And what that allowed me to do is to really think in terms of computer logic. How does a computer work through the code that I'm giving it? It gave me the ability to kind of think like a computer. So I think that's probably the single most valuable thing that I ever did was to learn how to code. It doesn't have to be Visual Basic. It could be anything, because a lot of those skills kind of translate to tools. They're just different syntax. Visual Basic's good if you're going to use Office a lot. So it actually was a transition point for me into Excel, and Excel was a transition point for me into Tableau. So I leveraged Excel a lot. When I first started using Excel, I didn't use formulas a lot because I didn't really know them that much. But I did know how to code stuff in Visual Basic, so I would end up writing code in the background with VBA to do the things that I wanted to do in Excel. And over time, I learned how to replace a lot of that with formulas that I wrote, and a lot of the formulas that you learn in Excel translate into Tableau. And of course, pivot tables are very much kind of a precursor to how you learn to use Tableau with VizQL. So all of that experience made it an easy transition point for me into using Tableau. From the presentation side of things, like how to lay things out, I spent a lot of time early on caring a lot about how things looked. When I started using Visual Basic and writing applications for that, it was kind of early in the internet era when America Online was big, and I would go into chat rooms as a teenager, and I would see all these cool things that people were able to do and had no idea how they did it, and they found out they were writing software. That's how I got started with Visual Basic. So I would download their programs. I'm like, ooh, this is kind of a cool design. And I would try to top that and, come up with my own design for stuff like that. And then I needed a web page to host all of that stuff. Kind of got me into web design. I wanted it all to look cool to get people to download my stuff. So I got Photoshop and started using Photoshop. And I started using PowerPoint to replace Photoshop because it's just tedious to do a lot of things in Photoshop. I'm pretty good with Photoshop, but it still takes a while. There's a lot of tweaking you have to do to get things to look nice. And then I think it was PowerPoint 2007 is when they kind of implemented some of the cool drawing tools that exist now. So all the shadow effects and neat things that would take me a lot of time to do in Photoshop, I could do really quick in PowerPoint. So I think those are probably the things that I would learn. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't go back and try to learn Excel if I'm already trying to learn Tableau. But it was good for me to know to move into using Tableau. And drawing tools, I mean, I would encourage you to, if you want to draw things, learn how to do drawing in PowerPoint.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Are there any other questions? If not, did you have another one, or Michael? I think your hand's still on.
No, I'm good.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna take everyone off mute, and just in case they want to speak up and they're having problems. But okay. Well,
hey,
Mark,
Mark.
Okay.
If you were to go back and redo it, so to create the exact same viz that was your final product, is there anything, you walked us through a lot of the steps, is there anything that you would do differently with hindsight in terms of execution?
Yeah, you mean the approach that I took to make this exact same thing?
Yes.
Well, there was a few things that I had to go back and fix, like the fact that these were images before, and not understanding how URLs would respond between images and actions and where those get directed. I would have saved some time there had I understood that. Actually, this section at the top with the follow me, that was originally a web page. I uploaded this separately as another viz to Tableau Public and used this as a URL. And because I was expecting that to get this to launch in another page, it was going to have to be in a separate viz so that the stuff that I clicked on didn't launch in this little web page object here when you click follow me on Twitter.
Yeah.
But then I realized images work differently, and it was actually always executing a new window. So I would have saved some time on that part as well. But the rest of it, I feel like I did pretty efficiently. It was just kind of a process of laying it all out. Oh, this actually was something I had to do with originally the labels that appeared on top of these, like the KPMG, Piedmont Heart, Piedmont Healthcare. Those were annotations as well, but I figured out when I uploaded it and you clicked on it, actually clicked on the annotation, and it wouldn't launch the audio. So I ended up having to actually incorporate those as labels. So I had to go back and fix that as well in the data source. If I come back and look at this, I just manually found the spot where I wanted it to show up. So I put those labels right here. So Piedmont Heart, my role, Piedmont Healthcare, my role. That way the label only showed up on the month where I wanted it to show.
Perfect. Got it. Thank you.
No problem.
Cool. Well, are there any other questions? Doesn't sound like it. Well, Mark, thank you again for taking the time to show us this and for spending so much time and being an amazing Tableau Zen master. It's been very insightful.
It's fun. You guys make my job really fun.
Well, and hopefully we'll see you at conference this year.
Definitely.
And thank you, everybody, for attending. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them on to me at tfitzgerald@tablowsoftware.com, and I can send them on to Mark directly.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.